Welcome to Nightfall Horror 002. Step into terrifying, true-style stories and subscribe now for more chilling tales. Actually, I used to love it. Airports, rental cars, unfamiliar towns, it all felt exciting. My job in corporate consulting sent me all over the country, and after years of staying in cold hotel rooms, I started booking secluded Airbnbs instead. Cabins, lake houses, mountain homes, places where I could breathe for a few days before returning to real life. That decision almost got me killed. This happened in late October of 2022. I had been sent to upstate New York for a 3-day consulting project near the Adirondack Mountains. If you've never been there during fall, it's hard to explain how beautiful it looks. The roads cut through endless forests painted deep orange and blood red. Fog rolled between the mountains every morning like smoke drifting through a battlefield. It looked unreal. I found a small cabin on Airbnb about 20 minutes outside the nearest town. The listing described it as peaceful and completely private. At the time, that sounded perfect. Now I realize privacy can be dangerous when nobody can hear you scream. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow dirt road surrounded by dense woods. No neighboring houses, no streetlights, just trees and silence. When I arrived Friday evening, the sun was already dropping behind the mountains. The owner had left the key inside a lockbox beside the front door. Everything looked exactly like the photos online. Wooden interior, stone fireplace, large back deck overlooking the forest below. At first, it felt relaxing. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat outside with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, and listened to the wind moving through the trees. Somewhere far below, I could hear water rushing through a creek. For a while, I remember thinking this might have been the best Airbnb I'd ever booked. Then, I noticed something strange. At the edge of the tree line behind the cabin, there was movement. At first, I thought it was a deer, but whatever it was stopped the second I looked directly at it. I sat there staring into the darkness for almost 30 seconds, trying to focus my eyes. The woods had gone completely silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. Then, my phone buzzed in my lap and nearly gave me a heart attack. It was just my coworker asking about tomorrow's meeting. When I looked back toward the trees again, whatever had been standing there was gone. I laughed it off. Honestly, I blamed the isolation. I grew up in Boston. I wasn't exactly used to being alone in the middle of nowhere. So I locked the doors, turned on every light downstairs, and went to bed around 11. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when the sound woke me. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. Not on the front door, on the window beside my bed. My eyes opened instantly. I froze under the blankets, barely breathing. Another 3 knocks echoed softly against the glass. Knock, knock, knock. And then a man's voice whispered from outside the window. Claire. Every hair on my body stood up because I had never told the Airbnb owner my last name.
For a few seconds, I genuinely couldn't move. My entire body locked up beneath the blankets while that voice echoed in my head. Claire. It wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. The voice sounded calm, almost familiar, like someone trying not to wake another person sleeping in the room beside me. I slowly reached for my phone on the nightstand without making noise. The screen lit up. 2:17 a.m. Another knock tapped against the glass. Knock, knock, knock. I finally forced myself to look toward the window. The curtains were thin enough that I could see the vague outline of someone standing outside. Tall, completely still. I stopped breathing. The cabin sat almost 15 feet above the slope behind the house. The bedroom window wasn't easily reachable from the ground. Whoever was standing there had either climbed the hill in complete darkness or had been watching the house long enough to know exactly where my room was. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed 911. No signal. I checked again. One bar appeared, then vanished. My chest tightened. The man outside shifted slightly, and for the first time, I noticed something else. He was smiling. Not a normal smile either. It looked stretched too wide across his face, barely visible through the curtains and moonlight. Then he whispered again, "You forgot to lock the back door." Every nerve in my body exploded. I jumped out of bed and sprinted toward the bedroom door just as I heard movement downstairs. Slow footsteps, heavy wooden boots crossing the floor beneath me. He was inside. I slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it with shaking hands. My brain couldn't process how this was happening. I know I locked every door before bed. I remembered checking them twice. Then I heard the back door creak downstairs, not opening, swinging in the wind. The realization hit me like ice water. Someone had unlocked it earlier, maybe before I even arrived. I backed away from the door while trying to call 911 again and again. Nothing, no signal. The footsteps downstairs stopped completely. Silence filled the cabin. And somehow, that silence felt more terrifying than the noise. Then came a loud thud against the bedroom door. I screamed. Another thud shook the frame harder this time. The man began laughing quietly from the other side. Not loud, crazy laughter. Soft laughter, like he was enjoying a private joke. "Claire," he whispered through the wood. "I just want to talk." I grabbed the small lamp beside the bed, holding it like a weapon, even though my hands were trembling so badly I could barely lift it. Then I noticed something horrifying. The bedroom door didn't fully reach the floor. There was a small gap underneath it. And slowly, very slowly, a shadow moved across that gap. He was standing directly outside the room. I backed toward the window, trying to think. The roof below the bedroom slanted toward the backyard. If I jumped carefully, maybe I could climb down and run into the woods. But before I could move, the man spoke again. Only this time, his voice changed completely. No whisper, no calm tone. Now he sounded angry. "You shouldn't have come here." The doorknob started turning violently. The doorknob twisted harder until the entire door began shaking inside the frame. I backed toward the window so quickly that I nearly slipped on the hardwood floor. My hands were numb with panic. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin suddenly felt impossibly small. Another violent slam hit the door. Wood cracked near the lock. Then silence again. That silence was somehow worse. I stood frozen beside the window, gripping the lamp with both hands, staring at the bedroom entrance while trying to listen for movement. Nothing. Not even breathing. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. For one stupid second, I actually thought maybe it was the police returning my failed emergency call. I answered without thinking. All I heard was breathing. Slow, wet, like someone standing too close to the microphone. Then the same voice whispered. The call disconnected. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps sprinting downstairs. Fast, aggressive. The front door exploded open beneath me. I heard furniture slam into the walls as whoever was inside rushed through the cabin. And then another voice shouted, "Police! Don't move!" Everything silent.
I couldn't even process what was happening anymore.
Several loud crashes echoed downstairs, followed by heavy footsteps pounding across the floor. Men were yelling over each other. Something shattered. Then I heard one sentence clearly. Get your hands off the knife. Knife. My stomach dropped. A few seconds later, someone banged on the bedroom door. Ma'am, police! I unlocked the door so fast, my fingers slipped twice. Two officers stood outside with flashlights and guns drawn. Behind them, the upstairs hallway looked destroyed. One of the wall frames had been knocked to the floor. Are you hurt? One officer asked. I could barely speak. I just kept shaking my head. They escorted me downstairs, and the second I entered the living room, I saw him. The man from outside my window. He was face down on the floor, with blood running from his nose, while three officers pinned him down in handcuffs. He looked completely different under the lights. Older than I thought. Late 40s maybe. Long, dirty hair. Thick beard. And those same wide-eyed eyes staring directly at me. But the thing I remember most wasn't his face. It was the expression. He looked confused. Genuinely confused. Like he couldn't understand why I was scared of him. One of the officers pulled a large kitchen knife from the man's waistband and held it up carefully with gloves. My knees almost gave out. I hadn't interrupted him while he was breaking in. He had already been inside the house long before I woke up. The police searched the cabin for over an hour while I sat wrapped in a blanket trying to shake. That's when they found the hidden space. There was a narrow storage space behind the basement utility room. Inside were empty beer cans, fast food wrappers, dirty blankets, and a back containing clothes, batteries, and bottled water. Someone had been living underneath the cabin. One officer finally walked over to me, looking disturbed. Ma'am, he said carefully. This guy isn't the homeowner. I stared at him. Then who is he? The officer hesitated before answering. He's the homeowner's ex-fiancé. My stomach twisted. Apparently, the owner had ended the relationship almost a year earlier after the man suffered what the police described as a severe psychological breakdown. According to them, he disappeared shortly after. Nobody knew where he'd gone until now. The officer explained they believed he had secretly returned to the property several days before my arrival, living underneath the cabin, watching the house, watching me. Then the officer said something that still keeps me awake at night. We don't think you were the first guest he watched.
I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The police eventually drove me into town around 5 in the morning after taking my statement. I sat inside the back seat of the cruiser, wrapped in a gray blanket, while fog drifted through the mountains outside the windows. Everything felt unreal. Like I was watching somebody else's nightmare unfold from far away. The officer driving me kept glancing through the mirror, probably checking to make sure I wasn't about to have a breakdown. Honestly, I think I already was. They booked me into a small roadside motel until the Airbnb owner could contact me. I remember sitting on the motel bed, staring at the wall, while the sunrise slowly brightened the room. My phone rang. Her voice sounded shaky and she apologized before finally explaining the full situation. The man's name was Daniel. They had been engaged for almost 3 years before things started getting bad. According to her, he became obsessive after losing his job during the pandemic. At first, it was small things. Accusing her of cheating, installing cameras around the house, checking her phone while she slept. It escalated. Then He stopped leaving the property. He stopped leaving the property. Started talking about people. One night she woke up and found him standing over the bed, holding a flashlight in her face while she slept. A week later, she left. After that, Daniel vanished completely. No calls, no messages, no messages, until the police dragged him out of the cabin floorboards the night before. I listened quietly. Staring out the motel window. I asked the question that had been eating at me since the officers arrived. How did the police know to come? There was a pause. She answered softly. You weren't the one who called 911. A cold feeling spread through my chest. The owner explained that around 2:20 that morning, another Airbnb guest, staying almost half a mile away, after seeing a flashlight behind my cabin. At first, they thought it might have been a lost hiker. Then the caller reported hearing a woman scream. If that couple hadn't been awake, I probably wouldn't be alive. The next few weeks were rough. I barely slept. Every little sound in my apartment. I started checking my locks multiple times. Sometimes I'd wake up convinced someone was standing outside my bedroom window. The worst part came 3 weeks later. I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small disposable camera. Nothing else. No explanation. At first, I thought maybe it was some weird mistake. Something about it made my stomach turn. I brought it to a local photo store and had the film developed. I wish I hadn't. Most of the photos were dark and blurry shots of the woods surrounding the cabin. The police initially believed the second backpack belonged to another guest. Maybe somebody accidentally left it behind That theory maybe somebody had accidentally left it behind. Inside the bag were women's clothes. That theory, a half-empty prescription bottle, a phone charger, and a driver's license belonging to a woman named Erica Miles. A phone charger. She had disappeared 11 months belonging to a woman last seen during a solo hiking trip near the Adirondacks 11 months earlier. My blood ran cold during a solo hiking trip near the Adirondacks because I recognized her immediately. My blood ran cold. She was the woman smiling in the Airbnb because I recognized her immediately. The owner. She was the woman smiling in the Airbnb profile picture. The real owner had been Erica, or at least the woman who called me after the attack. The real owner had been Erica. It was Daniel's sister. The woman who called me after the attack. Everything after that turned into a complete nightmare. It was Daniel's Police discovered Daniel had been secretly using Erica's Airbnb account long after her disappearance. He continued renting the cabin to travelers while pretending Erica was alive and traveling overseas. He continued renting the cabin to nobody questioned while pretending Erica was alive and traveling overseas for work. Nobody questioned it. Beneath the cabin floorboards, the guests kept arriving, watching, listening beneath the cabin floorboards. Detectives later uncovered disturbing evidence showing he had likely been living under the property for nearly a year. Uncovered disturbing evidence showing he had likely been living under the property for nearly a year. Doors unlocking occasionally complained of nothing serious enough to trigger an investigation. Doors unlocking during the night, but nothing serious enough to trigger an investigation. The authorities never officially confirmed what happened to Erica. I almost did. But they did search the authorities never officially confirmed what happened to Erica. Dogs. But they did search the woods behind the cabin for nearly 2 weeks. They found pieces of burned clothing near the creek, and traces of blood inside an abandoned storm drain less than half a mile from the property. And traces of blood inside an abandoned storm drain less than half a mile from the property. After his arrest, no body. According to one detective, he spent most of his interviews smiling silently at the table. According to one detective, he spent most of his interviews. The entire case became at the table, local news sometimes for a while. Laughing to my coworkers recognized the entire case became once the investigation news for a while. My coworkers kept recognizing the story, asking for interviews once the investigation went public. Every single one. Reporters kept contacting the entire asking for interviews from my life. I refused every single one. Doesn't disappear. I wanted that entire thing erased. About 6 months later, I moved apartments. Fear doesn't disappear that new city. New About locks. 6 months later, I thought finally putting distance between myself and that cabin would help me feel normal again. I thought finally putting distance between myself and that cabin in the morning would help me feel normal thirsty again. And walked into my kitchen. Night, sometime around 1 in the morning, I woke up thirsty and walked into my kitchen. My heart nearly stopped. There on the counter, it showed me asleep in my new apartment. The photo had been taken from inside my bedroom doorway, asleep in my new apartment. Written the photo had been taken from inside my bedroom doorway. Wrong room at the bottom. Written in black marker. I called the police immediately. 4 words. They searched the apartment top to bottom and found no signs. I called the police immediately. Nothing stolen. They searched the apartment top to bottom. No surveillance. No signs of forced entry. The strangest part. Nothing stolen. Daniel was still in jail. No surveillance. The detective handling my case later admitted something off the record. In jail. When officers searched the handling my case later admitted something off the record. Evidence suggesting Daniel hadn't been living beneath the cabin months earlier. 2 sleeping areas. Found evidence suggesting Daniel hadn't been living there alone. But only 1 sleeping ever arrested. 2 sets whoever the second person was. 2 people. They disappeared. But only 1 before ever arrested. Arrived that and night. Whoever the second person was.
This is where the real horror begins. And trust me, what happens next, you won't forget. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe to Nightfall Horror 002 because something even more terrifying is coming.
About 2 years later, I stopped using Airbnb completely. No cabins, no vacation homes, no cozy hidden escapes in the woods. Just hotels with cameras, front desks, and people nearby. That was the rule I gave myself after the Adirondack incident. And for a while, I actually started feeling normal again. Then, my company offered me a promotion. The catch was that I'd have to relocate to Ohio and complete one final in-person interview before signing the contract. 5-hour drive, 1 overnight stay, simple. My fiancé, Mark, offered to come with me, but I told him it wasn't necessary. I didn't want him wasting an entire weekend sitting in a hotel while I handled meetings. Big mistake. The interview itself went great, better than I expected, honestly. By the time it ended, the sun had already started setting, and I was too exhausted to drive 5 hours back home. That's when Mark texted me an Airbnb link. I remember staring at it for a full minute. "You serious?" I replied. He told me it was cheap, close to the office, and had amazing reviews. Just 1 night, in and out. Against my better judgment, I booked it. The house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood about 10 minutes outside town. Unlike the cabin, this place looked completely normal. Small 2-story house, clean lawn, neighbors nearby. Safe. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The owner messaged me before arrival and gave me a keypad code for the front door. He seemed friendly enough, even told me I could check in early if I needed time to relax before the interview. Everything about it felt ordinary. That almost made it easier to ignore the warning signs. The house itself was nice inside. Modern furniture, fireplace, huge TV mounted above it. There was even a bowl of candy left on the kitchen counter with a handwritten note welcoming me. After the stress of the past few years, the normalcy actually comforted me. I ordered food, called Mark for a while, and spent the evening trying not to overthink every awkward interview answer I'd given earlier. Around 11 that night, I curled up on the couch downstairs and started watching a movie. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the sound of the doorbell jolted me awake. Ding dong! I sat upright instantly.
The room was dark except for the TV. At first, I thought the sound came from the movie itself. Then the bell rang again. Ding dong! My chest tightened. I checked my phone. 11:34 p.m. Who rings someone's doorbell that late? The bell rang a third time, longer this time. I muted the TV and listened carefully. Nothing outside. No voices, no car engine, just silence. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, but curiosity got the better of me. I walked toward the front windows carefully and peeked through the blinds. A man stood on the porch, tall, skinny, wearing a dark hoodie, and in his hands he held a small brown paper bag. Something about the way he stood there made my stomach twist. His head was tilted downward unnaturally far, almost like he was avoiding the porch light. The bell rang again. Slowly, I approached the door and kept the chain lock attached before opening it a few inches. The man never looked up. In a flat, emotionless voice, he said, "Pizza delivery." I stared at the brown bag. It clearly wasn't pizza. "I think you have the wrong house," I replied. Without moving his head, the man quietly repeated the exact street address of the Airbnb. Then he whispered, "Delivery for Claire." My blood froze instantly. I had never given my name to the Airbnb owner.
The moment he said my name, something in my brain shut down. It wasn't fear at first. It was disbelief, because there are only a few ways a stranger in a random suburban house can know your name, and none of them are good. I tightened my grip on the door and forced my voice to stay steady. "You have the wrong person! Leave!" For the first time, the man slightly lifted his head, just enough for the porch light to hit his face, and I immediately regretted looking. His eyes were unfocused, not exactly looking at me, but not looking away either, like he was staring through the glass instead of at it. The brown paper bag in his hands crinkled as he adjusted his grip. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. "I already dropped it off once. You didn't answer." I shook my head. "I've been here all night." That's when he smiled. Not a normal smile. Too slow, too controlled, like he was remembering how to do it. He raised the bag slightly. "Then who opened the door earlier?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't opened the door. I hadn't even moved from the couch until the doorbell rang. Before I could respond, the porch light flickered once, then again, and in that split second of dim light, I saw something behind him. A car parked across the street, engine running, lights off, and someone sitting inside, watching. The man on the porch took one step closer. The chain lock tightened against the doorframe. I stepped back immediately. "Go away," I said again, louder this time. Instead of leaving, he tilted his head further and whispered, "You don't remember me, do you?" That sentence hit differently. Not threatening, not random, personal. My hand started shaking as I slowly reached for my phone behind my back. No signal, of course. The man suddenly pressed his palm flat against the door, not knocking, just holding it there, like he was feeling the wood. Then he said something softer. "I brought you something from before." My mind raced through every possibility. Before what? Before I moved here? Before I met Mark? Before the Adirondack cabin? The porch light flickered again, and this time I swear I saw movement in the reflection of the window behind him.
Someone inside the house, behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because the man outside slowly slid the brown paper bag closer to the crack of the door and whispered, "He said you would recognize it." That's when I heard a sound from the kitchen behind me, a cabinet closing, slow, deliberate. I wasn't alone.
I didn't turn around immediately. That's the part I still can't explain. My body refused to move, like my instincts had overloaded and shut down all at once. Behind me, the house was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not empty, occupied. The man outside the door stayed perfectly still, his hands still pressed flat against the wood. Then whispered, almost amused, "So he's already inside." My throat dry. I finally forced myself to step backward, inch by inch, without taking my eyes off the door. The kitchen was only a few steps away. Dark, still. The TV glow from the living room barely reached it. I grabbed the lamp from the side table, holding it like it could actually protect me from anything. Then I turned. The kitchen looked normal. Too normal. Cabinets closed. Nothing moved. No obvious shadow. But I could hear it now. Very faint. A slow metallic sound, like a spoon lightly tapping against glass. Tink, 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 tink. From somewhere near the sink. I swallowed hard and took one step forward. The sound stopped instantly. Complete silence again. From the front door, the man spoke again, louder this time. "You shouldn't go in there alone." I spun back toward him. Who are you? I shouted. For the first time, he hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Then he said, I'm the one who cleans up what he leaves behind. My skin went ice cold. Before I could respond, something moved in the kitchen. Fast. Not a shadow this time. A shape. Low. Close to the floor. I stumbled backward into the living room, knocking over a small table. The crash echoed through the house. The man outside the door suddenly stepped back from the door, not leaving, reacting, like the sound inside had changed something. Then I heard it, a second voice from inside the kitchen. Calm, close, Claire. My name again. But this time it wasn't outside. It was inside the house. I backed toward the hallway, shaking uncontrollably, trying to decide whether to run upstairs or out the back door. Then the kitchen light flicked on. I didn't touch it. It just turned on. And for half a second, I saw a reflection in the microwave door. Someone standing behind me. So close, I could feel their presence. I didn't scream. I couldn't because a hand slowly covered my mouth from behind. And a voice whispered directly into my ear. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The man at the front door suddenly started banging hard, violent, like he was trying to get in. And the last thing I heard before everything went chaotic was him shouting, He's not supposed to take her yet.
Everything after that happened too fast to process clearly. The hand over my mouth pulled me backward, away from the hallway, toward the kitchen tiles. I could feel my feet barely touching the ground, like I was being dragged rather than held. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not blood, something worse. Stale cigarette smoke mixed with cleaning chemicals, like someone trying very hard to erase evidence that never fully disappears. I kicked backward hard. My heel connected with something solid. A grunt came from behind me, and in that split second, I broke free. I stumbled forward, grabbing the kitchen counter for balance, finally turning around. There was no clear face, just a man in dark clothing standing too close, his hoodie half open, eyes barely visible in the dim kitchen light. He looked annoyed, not angry, not panicked, annoyed like I had interrupted something scheduled. Before he could react, the front door exploded again. Bang! Bang! The man outside was still there, still hitting the door, still shouting, "Open it! You're making it worse!" The man inside glanced toward the sound. That hesitation saved me. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, an iron skillet from the stove, and swung it blindly. It hit his shoulder. He staggered back, not enough to fall, but enough for me to run. I sprinted toward the back of the house. Behind me, I heard footsteps chasing me, but they weren't running fast. That was the most terrifying part. He wasn't rushing. He was following, like he knew exactly where I was going. The back door was locked. Of course it was. My hands fumbled with the deadbolt. The footsteps got closer, and then, bang! The front door finally gave way. Wood cracked. The house filled with yelling, but I couldn't look because something grabbed my ankle. I fell hard onto the floor. My vision blurred. The man behind me leaned down and whispered, "You weren't supposed to see both of us." Before I could react, the front hallway erupted with shouting. Multiple voices now, flashlights, footsteps. Someone yelled, "Police! Get down!" A gunshot cracked through the house. Everything froze. The grip on my ankle instantly loosened. I scrambled forward, crawling toward the back door as chaos exploded behind me. More shouting, commands, something crashing into a wall, and then I heard it. The man at the front door screaming, "I told you not to take her here!" That sentence didn't make sense. Not then, not now, but I didn't stop to think. I pushed the back door open and fell outside into cold night air, rolling onto the grass. Behind me, the house was a storm of flashing lights and noise, and in the middle of it all, I saw something I'll never forget. Two men being pulled apart by police. Two different suspects, two different directions. One of them was the pizza delivery man. The other was the man inside the house, and they were shouting at each other, not at the police.
I stayed on the ground outside the house, frozen in the wet grass, while everything around me collapsed into controlled chaos. Police lights washed the entire yard in red and blue. Officers were shouting orders I could barely understand. Someone wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, but I barely felt it. My body was still locked in survival mode, like it hadn't accepted that I was safe yet. Inside the house, the shouting continued, but something about it was wrong. It wasn't just officers yelling commands. There were two separate arguments happening at once. Two voices refusing to stop talking. I kept staring at the doorway. Then I saw him again. The pizza delivery man, cuffed, on his knees on the front porch, head finally raised. But now he looked completely different. Not calm, not emotionless. He was furious. He kept turning his head toward the inside of the house, shouting over the officers. "I was supposed to handle her first." An officer slammed him down harder, but he kept talking. Inside, they dragged out the second man, the one who had been in the kitchen. He looked less injured than I expected, almost composed, watching everything with a strange kind of patience, like he was observing a failed experiment. When his eyes met mine, he didn't look away. He smiled slightly, just once.
That small detail made my stomach turn because it didn't feel like fear. It felt like recognition, like this wasn't the first time he had seen me panic. An officer walked over to me and asked if I knew either of them. I shook my head immediately. No, I've never seen them before in my life. But even as I said it, something felt off, because the pizza delivery man suddenly laughed from the porch, a short, sharp sound, and said, "She always says that at first." That sentence made the officer pause. The man in the kitchen finally spoke too, calmly from the inside of the doorway. "She's confused. She doesn't remember the arrangement." Arrangement. The word made no sense. I started shaking again. The officer beside me tightened his grip on his flashlight. "Both of you, shut up," he ordered. But the two men ignored him completely. They were still talking to each other, not arguing about the police, not about being arrested, about me. "You crossed the line bringing her here," one said. "She was already in rotation," the other replied. That was the moment everything stopped making sense. Even the officers seemed confused now. One of them whispered something into his radio. Inside the house, a third officer shouted, "Basement is clear." But the man in the kitchen suddenly laughed, softly, and said, "No, it's not." All the lights inside the house flickered at once, just once, and in that single blink of darkness, I heard something from underneath the floor. A knock, slow, deliberate, from below us, not outside, not inside, beneath. And then a voice, faint, muffled, and impossibly close, whispered through the ground, "Next guest is already here."
Before you leave, one question. Are you sure no one is behind you? If you liked this feeling, subscribe to Nightfall Horrors 002 and stay with Nahid Hassan, because the horror doesn't end here. The moment that voice came from beneath the floor, everything outside the house shifted. Even the officers reacted. One of them immediately shouted for everyone to back away from the structure. Another lifted his flashlight and aimed it directly at the wooden porch boards, like he suddenly wasn't sure what he was standing on. I remember looking down at the ground and thinking something completely irrational, like the house itself had started speaking. The pizza delivery man went silent for the first time. The calm one inside the doorway didn't. He actually looked satisfied, like the situation had just confirmed something he already knew. "Don't open the basement," he said quietly. An officer snapped back at him. "You don't give orders here." But the man didn't even look at him. He was staring at the floor, right where I had heard the knock. Then he said something that made the entire scene feel colder. He's finally letting someone else take over. I didn't understand what he meant. None of us did, until one officer moved toward a small access hatch near the side of the house, a basement entrance I hadn't even noticed before. It was slightly open, just a crack, enough for air to escape, and something else, a smell, not decay, not mold, something lived in, like closed space, sweat, old fabric, time. The officer hesitated, then pulled it open fully. A ladder led down into darkness. He shined his flashlight inside. At first, nothing, just concrete walls, storage shelves, old insulation. Then the beam moved slightly to the left, and he froze.
Jesus Christ, he whispered. Everyone rushed closer. I couldn't see at first because the officers blocked my view, but I heard the change in their breathing, the shift from control to shock. One of them stepped back and said, "Did we miss this?" Another voice responded, lower, "No, this wasn't here before." That sentence made no sense, but then I saw it. Behind the shelves was a second wall. Fresh wood, not old construction, new, recently installed, and scratched into it, deep enough to be visible even from where I stood, were words. Not random, not messy, deliberate. "Do not let her leave twice." My knees nearly gave out. Behind me, the pizza delivery man started laughing again, but it sounded different now. Not mocking, not angry, relieved, like something had finally reached the stage it was waiting for. The calm man in the doorway finally turned his head toward me fully and said softly, "I told you, you were already inside the system." Before anyone could react, something slammed hard from inside the basement wall. Bang! Dust exploded upward. Another hit followed immediately. Bang! Then a third. The officers pulled back instantly, shouting orders, and from behind the wooden barrier, a voice, closer now, clearer now, spoke again, not whispering this time, just calm, patient, alive. "Claire, don't make me come up there." For a moment, nobody moved. Even the officers seemed locked in place, staring at the basement entrance like it was something that shouldn't exist in the physical world. Then, the wood inside the wall cracked again. Bang! This time, splinters shot outward. An officer shouted, "Back up! Back up now!" I was pulled farther away from the house, but my eyes stayed fixed on that opening. The air itself felt wrong, like pressure shifting under the ground. And then I heard something new. Not a knock, not a voice. Footsteps. Slow, measured, coming up the ladder. The pizza delivery man suddenly started struggling against his cuffs. For the first time, real panic broke through his expression. No, he's not supposed to surface yet," he muttered, almost to himself. The calm man in the doorway finally stepped forward and said something that made my stomach drop. "He's early." An officer turned on him immediately. "Who is he?" But the question never got answered, because the basement hatch burst open. The ladder shook violently as something climbed it from below, not rushing, not scrambling, climbing like it had done this many times before. An officer fired his flashlight beam directly into the opening, and what I saw next didn't fully register at first. A man came up, covered in dust, slowly standing upright at the top of the ladder, but he didn't look like the others, not disheveled in a normal way, controlled, composed, like he had been living in darkness on purpose, not out of necessity. He looked around the scene outside the house with mild curiosity. Then his eyes landed on me, and he smiled, not wide, not forced, familiar, like seeing someone you expected to arrive. One of the officers shouted, "Hands up!" The man didn't react. Instead, he tilted his head slightly and said, "She always gets out the same way." My entire body went cold, because that sentence didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like observation, like he had watched me before, many times. The pizza delivery man screamed from the porch, "That's not part of the schedule." At the same time, the first man inside the doorway snapped back. She was reassigned. The officers were shouting now, confused, trying to take control of a situation that was clearly spiraling beyond anything they expected. But the new man from the basement didn't look at them. He only looked at me and spoke again, calmly, clearly. You weren't supposed to meet both versions at once. That word, versions, made something in my memory twist painfully, like I was missing a piece of a puzzle I was never meant to see. Before I could even process it, all three men started talking at the same time, not arguing anymore, explaining to each other about me, about timing, about rotations, about incorrect placements. And then the basement man said something that stopped everything again. She remembers more than last time. Silence hit instantly. Even the officers paused, and for the first time, all three of them looked at me at the same time. Not as a victim, not as a target, but as something else entirely. The basement man spoke softly. This is why the loop is breaking. And the lights inside the house flickered again. But this time, they didn't come back on.
The darkness didn't feel like a lack of light. It felt intentional, like someone had switched the world into a different setting and forgotten to switch it back. For a few seconds, the only thing I could hear was breathing. Mine, the officers, and something deeper in the house that didn't belong to anyone standing outside. Then a flashlight clicked on. Another followed. The yard became fractured in small circles of light, like everyone was trying to rebuild reality piece by piece. But inside the house, nothing moved. Not the three men, not the officers inside, not even the dust from the basement. Everything had gone still in a way that felt staged. Then the basement man spoke again, and this time his voice carried slightly farther, like the air itself was helping him. "Don't restart it here." One officer yelled back, "Nobody is restarting anything!" But even he didn't sound confident anymore. The pizza delivery man suddenly laughed again, but it broke halfway through, turning into something sharp. "He already did," he said, still struggling against the cuffs. "He moved her twice. That's why they're overlapping." The calm man in the doorway finally stepped out onto the porch, slowly, unbothered by the weapons, the shouting, the chaos. He looked at me again and said something that made my brain feel like it couldn't hold on to reality anymore. "You remember the first house, don't you?" I shook my head immediately. "No, I've never seen you before." But even as I said it, I felt something crack inside me, like a memory trying to surface but hitting a wall. A cabin, cold air, a window. No, 2 windows. The basement man suddenly raised his voice from behind. "She's remembering the wrong sequence." An officer grabbed my arm. "Ma'am, do you recognize any of these men?" I wanted to say no again, but my mouth didn't move fast enough because I suddenly saw something flash in my mind. Not a clear memory, a feeling. Standing in a doorway, hearing my name, once, twice, from different directions. I stumbled back. "No," I whispered, "that's not real." But the basement man answered immediately. It was real, just not in this version. The officers looked at each other now, clearly realizing this situation had moved beyond anything procedural. One of them spoke into his radio again, voice tight. "We need more units, now!" But the calm man shook his head slightly and said, "That won't change what's already been recorded." Then he looked directly at the ground, at the house, at the structure itself, and added quietly, "She's already on the second pass." The moment he said that, something underneath the porch groaned.
a deep wooden sound, like the house itself was shifting weight. And then, from the basement, a new voice emerged, not from the man, not from the others, from deeper, older. Correction acknowledged. Every flashlight froze at once. Even the officers stopped moving, because that voice didn't sound like a person speaking. It sounded like something confirming a status. The basement man exhaled slowly and said, almost respectfully, "He's awake now." After that voice spoke from beneath the house, everything outside the cabin changed again, but not in a way anyone could point to. There was no explosion, no sudden movement, just a shift in attention, like the world itself had decided to stop pretending. The officers' flashlights stayed frozen on the porch, but their beams no longer felt steady. Hands trembled, radios crackled without clear words. Even the wind seemed to hesitate between gusts. And then the calm man finally looked uneasy for the first time. Not afraid, calculating, like a machine encountering an unexpected variable. He stepped back slightly from the porch edge and said under his breath, "This wasn't supposed to trigger outside containment." The pizza delivery man started laughing again, but it sounded strained now. "He's not contained. He never was. You just placed her wrong again." I stood there trying to understand what they were even arguing about. Contained, placed, version, sequence. It didn't sound like people talking about a crime anymore. It sounded like people talking about a system, a structure, something repeating. The basement man slowly climbed fully out now, standing beside the open hatch. Dust still fell from his shoulders as he looked up at the house with a kind of tired recognition. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. "She's not supposed to remember across transitions." One officer shouted, "What transitions?" But nobody answered him, because the sound came again from below. Not louder, closer, like the house had no depth anymore, only layers. A soft creaking filled the porch, then the wooden boards beneath my feet shifted slightly, not collapsing, realigning. The calm man suddenly turned sharply toward me, and for the first time his voice lost its patience. "Claire, don't focus on them. Focus on what you saw before you got here." I shook my head violently. I didn't see anything before this. But even as I said it, I felt it again. That same fragment, a hallway, a door I couldn't quite remember opening, and my name being spoken from somewhere I couldn't locate. The basement man stepped forward and spoke directly to me now, softly, almost gently. "You've been waking up in the wrong room every time." My breath caught. "What does that mean?" I finally whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the other two men, and for the first time, all three of them stopped competing. They aligned, not physically, but in understanding. The calm man said quietly, "She crossed between two active runs." The pizza delivery man added, "That's why both of us reached her." The basement man finished it, and now the original host is noticing the interference. A long silence followed. Then, from inside the house, the sound of something dragging slowly across the floor. Not footsteps, not movement, something heavier, deliberate. And the voice from below spoke one final time that night. Subject integrity compromised. The porch lights flickered once more, and this time, when they returned, there were more people standing in the yard than there had been before. People I didn't see arrive. People who were already there, watching, like they had been there the entire time, and all of them were looking directly at me.
I don't remember deciding to run. My body just did it. One second, I was standing in the yard surrounded by flashing lights, officers, and strangers who suddenly felt like they had always been there. And the next second, I was moving through the darkness behind the house, branches tearing at my clothes, lungs burning, feet slipping on wet soil. Nobody shouted. Nobody chased me immediately. That silence was somehow worse than everything that came before it. Behind me, I could still see the house. The porch lights flickered again. Not broken this time. Rhythmic. Like a signal. Then I heard a voice, far behind me, but clear enough to cut through everything. "Don't let her reach the road." I ran faster. The forest swallowed the sound of my footsteps almost completely, like it was absorbing me on purpose. I didn't know where I was going, just away, away, away from the house that felt less like a building and more like something alive. After what felt like forever, I reached the edge of the woods, a narrow dirt road. My legs nearly collapsed when I saw it, but then headlights appeared. A car, approaching slowly. At first, I thought it was rescue, police, someone normal. But when it stopped, I realized something immediately felt wrong again. The engine idled, the windows were tinted too dark to see inside, and the car didn't have markings, just a plain, unmarked black vehicle. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. I froze. He looked at me like he already knew exactly who I was, not surprised, not confused, just confirming. He spoke my name, softly, like he had said it many times before. Claire. I backed away immediately. No, I don't know you. He raised a hand slightly, not threatening, controlling. Good, he said calmly. That means we're still early in this iteration. Iteration. That word again. Behind him, far in the distance, I saw the house lights flicker one final time through the trees. And for a split second, I swear I saw multiple versions of the same house overlapping each other in the dark. Different angles, different layouts, like reality was misaligned. The man in front of me continued speaking. You were never supposed to reach the exit point on your own. I turned to run again, but my legs stopped responding properly, like the ground wasn't solid anymore, like something underneath it had changed structure. The man sighed, almost disappointed, then said something that still echoes in my head. This is why we don't let subjects remember between loops. The forest behind me went completely silent. Even the wind stopped. And in that silence, I heard the house again. Not behind me, not in the distance, everywhere. A single voice overlapping itself from every direction. Welcome back, Claire. I don't know how I got home that night, or if home is even the right word anymore. But I do know this. Every once in a while, when I wake up at exactly 3:12 a.m., I hear a soft knock somewhere in the room. And sometimes, I remember things I was never supposed to remember.
This video is over. This video but the story isn't. But the story because Nahid Hassan was never found. And if your phone turns on by itself tonight, just know you've been chosen. You've been chosen. Subscribe to Nightfall Horrors 002 because you're not safe. Because you're not